Uh, Commodus died in 191 AD or CE, ended the Pax Romanus. The Pax Romanus lasted a century under 5 emperors. It was These were Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, more commonly remembered as Pius, and then Marcus Aurelius, and finally Commodus and Lucius. They were the 5 good emperors of the Roman Empire, ending with chaos. The reason why it was called the Roman Peace, because during that time period, Rome was the dominant hegemon, the dominant power in Europe. The Roman Empire controlled half of Europe at the time, and during that time period, the empire experienced unprecedented growth and prosperity, which it wouldn't ever experience again because after Commodus died, the empire entered a series of long decline. The Roman Empire finally collapsed with the fall of Constantinople in 1453. The Roman Empire collapsed in 476, the end of the Roman Empire in the west and in the east. Now, the reason why this is related to Great Britain was because from the end of the Napoleonic Wars and the French Revolutionary Wars from 1793 until 1815, England was in a 23-year-long conflict with Republic of France and then Napoleonic France for over 20 years. That war was partly caused by the American Revolution from 1775 until 1783, or from 1776 until 1783, depending if you count the battles of Lexington and Concord in 1775 as the start of the American Wars of Independence, just because America didn't declare independence until Washington took Boston in late 1775 and 1776, and the Americans declared their independence in 1776 in March. Now, the reason why these two events are linked was because the American Revolution, which ended in 1783, and the start of the French Revolution with the storming of the Bastille in 1789, they're both linked because one revolution leads to another revolution. You can see that today with the Arab Spring that took place in the middle of the 2010s. And there's a correlation. If there's a rebellion in another country or a revolution, it can lead to other revolutions and rebellions throughout a region or throughout the globe, depending on the political circumstances and internal politics and dispositions of different nations. So the American Revolution is also responsible for the French Revolution and Europe being engulfed in over 20 years of constant warfare. Now, after the defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte at Waterloo in 1815, England for 100 years, or almost 100 years, from 1815 until 1914, that time period is called the Pax Britannica, but during that time period, England was the richest nation in the world, it had the largest navy in the world, it was the strongest nation, and that came tumbling down due to two events. First, World War One, which crippled the British Empire financially, to its slow collapse throughout the 1920s, 1930s, with South Africa, Canada, Australia gaining independence apart from foreign policy. And also India by the 1930s, it was pretty clear that it was heading towards the road of independence. And then there was World War II from 1939 until 1945, which was the death knell of the British Empire, because the British was no longer willing to spend money and treasure on being the world's policeman and protecting global shipping lanes. That job was taken over by the United States from 1945 until present day, sometimes called the Pax Americanus. Now, the reason why the American Revolution and American independence led to the permanent collapse of the Britannica and British power, because the Americas was seen as a way for England to establish itself a true continental power, not just being a naval power, and that the Americas was very much the El Dorado, promised land for the peoples of England, just because America now it's the size of a continental power, stretches from the Atlantic to the Pacific. It's one of the largest nations on earth, and it was the hope of the English people and the British Parliament. America would be this nation's future. Obviously, with the American Revolution, and it come to pass, and ultimately the American Revolution robbed England of its future, of the power of relevance, and it was replaced by the United States, both being from the same cultural group of the Anglo-Saxons or English, but that might be controversial to the United States just because English is one of the biggest ethnic groups within America, but no American will ever call themselves English. They see themselves as American. Same with Australians, same with Canadians, even though they're heavily influenced by the English history, the English Constitution. You know, one of the big reasons for the American Wars of Independence was due to the rights of taxation, and that goes all the way back to the Middle Ages, when King John of England, who reigned from 1199 until 1216, was forced to sign Magna Carta in 1215 by his barons over taxation, no taxation without representation, and that was also a correlation for the American Wars of Independence because England English Parliament, the British Parliament, was trying to tax the American colonies, but the American colonies didn't want to be taxed because previously the colonies were never actually heavily taxed or had to pay massive tariffs. And because of this, it led to the American Wars of Independence once again. It was part of the political culture that in order to tax anybody, they must have representation inside the British Parliament, the English Parliament. Those two are intermixed because when we say British Parliament, we really mean the English Parliament. It's the union with Scotland. The Act of Union was signed in 1707. This wasn't a union of nations, it was a union of parliaments. In 1603, when King James the First of England, who was before King James VI of Scotland, took the English crown, to the death of Queen Elizabeth I in 1603, there was a union of crowns. And then 1707, there was the union of parliaments. Technically, England and Scotland are still separate countries, but they are united by parliament. That's why Scotland has its own laws, its own education system, still very much separate from England and Wales, just because the union of the three nations within Great Britain is a union of parliaments, not a union of nationalities. And for the United States, something similar would have potentially have happened, but due to the geographical distances, most likely would have been impracticable due to technology at the time. But that was the leading cause of the American Revolution. It wasn't over equality, it was over taxation. The reason why that became such an issue about equality was because the American founding fathers need to justify their rebellion and saying this is a war all about taxation and representation. It doesn't have the same grandiose attitude because they're fighting a war over taxation, and mostly it was the rich who paid tax. And that's sort of something that you can really get behind when trying to find a nation fighting a war against the home country over taxes. This concludes today's episode. I'll leave the article that I've written. It also has the sources within the article so you can read my thoughts about how the American Revolution contributed to the permanent decline of Britain as a global power. And very much costs England its future as a power. It's now purely a regional power contained within Europe. I will do an episode in the future about England's place in the world, about Britain's place in the world, how it's declined, and how it is as free at the moment as three possible choices. One, rejoining the European Union. Two, do what it did historically and seek power, prestige, and wealth internationally through the ways through sea power. That is most likely impossible due to American influence and power taking on previous responsibilities that England did historically. So that's a very unlikely option. The final option, it may be controversial, is union with the United States, with the British Parliament hoping to apply to unionship with the Americas due to similar cultures, similar languages, and our dependency on the American security blanket. Thanks for listening to this today's podcast. Please leave a comment. If you wish to ask me any questions, please message me on my Substack and on Medium. I'm also available on Twitter as well. Hope you enjoyed today's episodes, and I wish you all a happy day or happy morning, and peace out. Welcome back to the Renaissance Humanism podcast. If you're watching this live or on YouTube, you can see this recording is now being done in natural lighting. Okay, today's episode is going to be about the American Revolution, how it ended the Pax Britannica. The word Pax is Latin for peace. You might remember that the word Pax, it was first used by the Roman Empire during the reign of the five good emperors, ending with Emperor Commodus.